Now we're ready to learn about all different types of relations and functions and what their graphs look like. So this is 2.2 part 1. The very first function we're going to talk about is the square function. We also call this the quadratic function. You'll probably hear quadratic a whole lot more than you'll hear square. It's a quadratic or square function because the highest exponent is a 2. And the graph of the square function is called a parabola. This is a very good word to know here. This is going to make a U-shaped graph. So if you were to plug in each of these numbers, you would have y is equal to negative 2 squared. Negative 2 squared is 4, so we get 4. Y is equal to negative 1 squared, we get 1. Y is equal to 0 squared, so we get 0. Y is equal to 1 squared, we get 1. And y is equal to 2 squared, we get 4. So if we plot those points, we get negative 2, 4, negative 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, and 2, 4. And that graph looks something like this. So what is the domain of the square function? Excuse me. The domain is negative infinity to infinity, or you can just say all real numbers. The range will start at 0 and go forever up. So the range is going to be 0 to infinity, including 0. So what if we put a 1/2 in front of the function x squared? Well, we're going to have 1/2 times negative 4 squared. Well, negative 4 squared is 16, and half of 16 is 8. So at negative 4 we get 8. What happens when we put a negative 2 in there? Well, negative 2 squared is 4, and half of 4 is 2. Put a 0 in. 1/2 of 0 squared is just 0. 1/2 of 2 squared is half of 4, which is 2. And 1/2 of 4 squared, that's half of 16, which is 8. So we get negative 4, 8. I think that's off the grid. Negative 2, 2. 0, 0. 2, 2. And 4, 8. So it's the same shape, but it's stretched horizontally. It gets a little bit shorter and fatter because of this 1/2 stuck in front. The domain is still all real numbers, and the range is still 0 to infinity. How about the square root function? I don't see it on there, do I? This is going to be f of x is equal to the square root of x. This is called the square root function. Well, plug in 0. What is the square root of 0? That's 0. What's the square root of 4? What is, oh, that's supposed to be a 1. So we did this one. What's the square root of 1? And the square root of 9? How about the square root of negative 1? It's I, and you can't graph an imaginary number, right? Okay, so we're not even going to worry about that one. So we're going to plot 0, 0, 1, 1, 4, 2, and 3, 9, which is off the grid. This looks something like this. Okay, so what would the domain of this function be? All the x coordinates that the graph covers, it only covers the positive x's, right? So it's going to be from 0 to infinity, including 0. And how about the range? Remember, the range is the set of all y coordinates. It starts at 0 and it goes forever up. So the range is also 0 to infinity. Determine whether y equals the square root of 1 minus x is a function, graph it, and state the domain and range. Well, we could do that in a different order. We could graph it first, then state the domain and range, then determine if it's a function. Doesn't really matter. So we have y is equal to the square root of 1 minus x. That's 1 minus negative 8, or the square root of 9, which is 3. The square root of 1 minus negative 3, or the square root of 4, which is 2. The square root of 1 minus 0, which is the square root of 1, or 1. And the square root of 1 minus 1, which is the square root of 0, or 0. Plot these points. So we have negative 8, 3, somewhere up here. We have negative 3, 2, 0, 1, and 1, 0. So this graph looks something like that. So what's the domain? All the x coordinates. The x coordinates are these, and then continuing to the left. So that would be starting at negative infinity and stopping here at 1, including the 1. But what about the range? The range again starts at this point and goes forever this direction. So the range would still be 0 to infinity. So compare this to the one on the previous page. How's it different? It's reflected over the y-axis, and it's shifted 1 unit to the right. That's because of what's underneath here. This negative will shift it this negative will reflect it over the y-axis, and the 1 is what's making it shift right or left.